welcome to my watercolor channel. Thank you for stopping by. Tally ho there.
Hello, and welcome to a new demo of a made-up street scene. I think it's based on a photo that I took in London at some point. Bit of street scene with some nice bright sky and some moody buildings and hopefully a nice bit of light. Just throwing in some yellow ochre, usual kind of sort of starting, sort of putting down colours and feel and, you know, just sort of getting a vibe for the initial washes. Throwing around some, I think it's cobalt blue, it's cobalt blue, and leaving a couple of little white patches for your clouds. Careful to sort of cut around the windshields of the cars at the moment. I mean, it's not, you know, they may be painted in. You never know, because it'll become lost in that busy middle ground section. But always keep the whites there that you want, because you can't get them back. You can always paint over them if you don't want them, but you can't get them back, obviously. So take care of that stuff and do a bit of planning before you do it, before you start your painting. I'd like to thank you all for watching these videos. Really sort of excited about the future and putting more videos together and getting better at them and more consistent at them. The stupid bloody day job gets too far in the way at the moment, so I'm working tirelessly to try and get as many out as I can. I'm gonna sort of gang tape a few of them and just have them loaded up and hopefully ready to go. Yeah, consistency is the key, and that's what I'm working towards. But no, I really appreciate it. Please feel free to comment and like and ask questions and share anything on your socials that you might think that people are into, and we'll turn us all into YouTube sensations yet. You know, I reckon. Yeah, why not give it a crack? Couple little directional lines going in here. Not too much is made of them. It's more kind of compositionally, just sort of feeling the way through the perspective, and I really like doing that kind of thing. Get a bit of dry, kind of let it dry from now. It's the initial wash is on, and you can see it dulls down a bit. The bright yellow at right in the guts in the horizon, the vanishing point's really nice. And just picking up, this is a little art spectrum brush, which is great, that they gave to me to try out. It's a fantastic little, it's just called Watercolor, Artist Watercolor or something like that, but it's art spectrum. They're great. Check it out. You know, just going to start throwing some, you know, shadow color around and things like that. Just trying to build up the feel of these buildings on the left hand side first. So tonally, we're talking, you know, light tones in your initial washes, some darker tones on the left hand side buildings, and some even darker on the right, just to kind of keep it all a bit interesting. I did this painting yesterday at my workshop at the Newcastle Society of Artists, and God, it polarised people. People really liked the picture and doing it. But yeah, it's I don't know. People got really freaked out about it. I thought it was a fairly simple, not a simple sort of task to do, but simple in its execution as far as the, you know, you got three big shapes there, and I don't know. I was a bit surprised that. Not that people sort of struggled with it, but more so kind of scared of it. But I was, yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know whether I've got to change my approach to teaching it and things like that, but I don't know. But it's really nice, actually. Yeah, the one that came out of the workshop demo that I did was, yeah, different to this again, but same sort of composition. Just sort of embellishing a few things here, putting some, well, I say detail, but they're not really, it's not really detail, it's just marks, and, you know, not even that many marks. It's just making little bits of interest here and there, all for, all to sort of create the overall vibe. Colour-wise, just sort of splashing that's a bit of yellow ochre around, and it'll dry off in a second, and we'll go on to the next phase, which is putting some, I think this next part I start putting some roof lines in on the buildings. Here we go. So what you didn't see off camera there is I actually threw in just some clean water along that roof line, sort of underneath it, on the underneath side, just to kind of let the bottom half of the dark brush strokes kind of bleed into the bleed in a little bit, just to not have such a hard edge there. But yeah, just sort of getting a few things running down and a bit of interest. Now these little dry brush strokes, just indicating some windows. Don't need to do too much of that. Like, don't sit there and state every single window, paint a little frame around it, all that kind of stuff, because it's just boring to look at, but it's tedious to paint, and we're after an impression. Just because I don't know what else to call the style that I go for, I think it's impressionism, I suppose, but it's indicating things without, slapping you around the face with them. And I guess that's impressionism. You're creating an impression of something. So yeah, cool. Just get into it. I don't like illustration and stuff like that in painting. It just bores me to tears. But I think I've said that before. But just scrolling through here, putting some little touches. Not much. Probably fiddling a bit too much at this point. I'm just putting some darks in there. If you can imagine, they're sort of shop awnings or something like that, and there's little shop fronts in that sort of bottom section. Throwing some more darks in the right hand side, so that it starts to really come forward and push the rest of the scene back, which is what we're after here. Darky, it's good. I kind of enjoyed this scene and this challenge of throwing things back and creating something from nothing, which is what it's sort of all about. These buildings, like in reality, in the photo that I took, I actually had a look at it, and they're all those brownstone-y type things, those little apartments and things like that you see lined up in London. It looked nothing like this, but I think this looks better. It gives you an impression of it. Throw in a couple of, little more interesting embellishments. A couple of flagpoles, really. Here's a way to do a flag. Put a little line, grab some clean water, and there's your flag. If it's, keep your flags neutral, unless it's a deliberately a picture of, somewhere in France or something. Put the French flag, whatever. But keep them basic. Once again, just mucking around with clean water and darkening around the cars and creating some interest in the back. There's not painting anything, but I'm just putting brush strokes down to create that feel of busyness in the back. And it's amazing how much that happens on its own when you just throw some nice little brush strokes in the background. And palette knife, here we go. Get some perspective with your palette knife there. It's all leaning toward the vanishing point and the horizon line. So keep an eye on your perspective at all times, because it doesn't matter how well you execute the application of the paint and all that kind of stuff. If your perspective's off as a general rule with your picture, then it's not going to work. So you can make You can draw the most beautiful cars, paint the most beautiful buildings, the most beautiful cars, but if they're all skew-if and they look like they're falling off the page or look like they're squashed and leaning over, then you haven't achieved anything really. So perspective's really important, unless you want to call it abstract, in which case just go and paint an abstract and don't pretend to call it a realism sort of street scene, I suppose. Palette knife is good fun. Try not to be too much. Try not to be too reliant on the palette knife, because it does create some cool effects. But just be careful, and always make sure you're scraping back on some really dark, thick pigment, so that you don't damage the paper. Here's a tip in watercolor. See the bottom left there, where that awning is, where the little orange or the yellow ochre is sort of melted down into the black on its own. Awesome. Keep it there. Don't get rid of it. That's the sort of beauty about watercolors. Those things happen. You can't paint those on like deliberately. It just happens. You can try and make them happen sometimes, but you can't physically paint it. When it happens, resist the urge to try and mess with it. Just leave it alone, because it looks cool. And take advantage of that with watercolor. So that's what the medium's all about. If you want a complete control over everything, watercolor is not the medium for you. Go and paint oils or acrylics or something where you can gain that control. You can fix mistakes and be a control freak over your paints. It's hard to give over to it. Trust me, it is very hard. But once you do, you start seeing the benefits of your watercolors. I just love the medium. I think it looks fantastic. Just throwing some different sort of colours here and there at the moment. Just nothing sort of too literal. Just creating a bit more interest, a bit more feel. These could be aerials or little antennas coming off things, or whatever. Just a bit more of an interesting roof line, because when you look up at roof lines, they've got little embellishments and adornments and gargoyles. Some of them got gargoyles. Who knows? But on this part here, we're just throwing it around, splash a bit of paint. Those shadows that are coming under the cars there, they're all cool. Let them bleed. They'll end up bleeding out a bit later on anyway. So throwing in some figures just with some dark paint. It's kind of like it looks a lot darker on the actual screen than it is, but it's more of a sort of a dark burnt umber with a bit of blue in it, so it's quite black, I suppose. But just throwing a couple of heads in here and there to make sure your heads are on the right plane as well, because you're you don't want to have the feel that you've got giant cars or giant humans and tiny cars and all that. You want to keep them roughly in line. If you're not sure of perspective and how tall things are and short things are, go and have a look. We're surrounded by cars, we're surrounded by people. Just have a look. When you're standing next to your own car next time, just have a look at roughly. I mean, there's variables obviously, but on average, well, I think we stand a little bit above most sedans. So yeah, go for it. I end up spraying this little orange bit off the main figure there. That just bugged me. I sprayed it off and I've let it dry, and it's kind of come back to this, which is fine and cool. Happy with it. And we're almost kind of done. We're just sort of wrapping up the little, just sort of going over the cars. We're kind of wrapping up the main sort of points of it now. And I'm going to the dark. The dark under the cars, very important. Don't ever miss that, because it's what anchors it to the road. If you don't get it dark underneath the car, they just look like they're floating in space and look like little cartoons or something. But and I just started throwing here. I'm throwing in another figure, one that's really, really close to us as the viewer, and just to push everything back a little and create a bit more perspective. That fence thing that I did wasn't pleasing me. But with this figure, we'll end up throwing things back, and you can see now just already it's throwing things back and it's given it a bit more of a lead in when you're looking at it. Here's the usual stuff of, you know, street lights and all that kind of thing, and a couple of you know, just making whoopee about all the little bits, just putting it back in. So if you squint your eyes, it's starting to kind of come together. It's not 100% where I want it yet, and it's, you know, if everything worked out every time all the time, then, you know, you're lying to yourself firstly. But you know, it's just not the way it works. So don't ever panic about your failures. It happens all the time to all of us, trust me. Now I've just sort of thrown a bit of sort of wet water down there just to create a bit of a reflection, a soft reflection under the cars. And more fiddling. I think I'm just waiting. Got to wait for it to dry, and I'll show up these next little steps and start putting the highlights and things in and start wrapping it up. But no, please check out my other videos as well. If this is the first one you're watching, check out the other ones. As I say, comment, like, email me. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. More than happy to answer and help out with your painting, or, you know, if there's someone you want to recommend to me, you know, like, I'm always happy. I'm constant, you know, we all should be, you know, perpetual students of this stuff. So yeah, really appreciate you interacting with me with that stuff. That'd be great. Now, I'm just throwing a couple of little things here, these little, you know, not telegraph poles, like light poles and things like that. Yeah, they're pretty kitsch. Don't do much of them. If you don't do them all perfectly in a row, as long as you keep the rough perspective, the closer ones closer ones taller and thicker, the, you know, etc. Keep your perspective right. And I did the one yesterday. I did at the demo at the workshop. Put a couple of little traffic lights posts in there, and, you know, just these simple things that you take for granted. Things like I put, you know, one of them was smaller and further back, and one of them was smaller, and one of them was, well, smaller than the other. One of them was bigger. Obviously, they were two different sizes, I mean to say. Then the lady asked, why are they different sizes? Like, well, yeah, the bigger one's closer to us. So keep that stuff in mind. Just throwing through. This is a good thing I like to do with these sort of things. Just got some clean water and a scrubber and a brush, obviously, and clean tissue. And I just sort of scrub a few little bits out here and there. See how it just sort of creates a bit of interest. They could be little sunlight flares. Almost look like lens flares if it was taken with a camera. You know, I just really like that sort of interest. Throwing a few little bits of red. I got carried away. I think I pissed a couple of these bits off there. Here, they were a bit too much. And turquoise. I love turquoise. Can't get enough of it. And just throwing things around, just getting a bit of, just making it a little bit more interesting, because you've got to think, once you step away from it and you're not looking at it, you haven't been looking at it for the last hour while you've been painting it, then, you know, you've got to maintain some kind of interest and some feel there. And the windscreens in the car, I do get some white gouache under those. You've heard me say it before about gouache. There's a lot of old school fuddy-duddies that really frown upon the whole use of gouache and opaque paints when you're talking watercolour. I don't understand it. I don't understand how people, it's a pigment, it's painting, it's making a work of art, you know. It's like some weird rule, like there's a rule. It freaks me out. But some people are really hooked on that idea. But for me, leaving your white highlights around a picture, it's just silly. Like if you're sacrificing the beauty of a wash, or a bit of work that you've leaving, you sacrifice that by leaving a hard edge around something just because you can't use gouache to get it back. It's just silly, and it's a little snobbery. You don't want to be a snob in art. It's just ridiculous. This colour that I showed you, it's by Holbein. It's called Juan Brilliant, and it's opaque. It's like it's white with a touch of burnt sienna in it or something. It's like a creamy colour, and it's just good for those little highlights if you don't want that stark white, if it's a warmer kind of scene. And obligatory splashes. I just love that stuff. Instant activity as soon as you splash some paint on. I think I'm getting the white out here to do the. Yep, there we go. Do the old windscreens and spray. Get some activity going here with the cars. Now, just careful of all those sort of stuff with reflections in cars. It gets pretty old pretty quick, so just be a bit mindful with all that sort of stuff. I'm spraying here deliberately. It got too much, so I just sort of mop up a little bit of that as well. But I didn't want the cars to be so rigid and sticker like, so I'm just mopping that up, and I'll come back. I think we're heading toward the ends of the picture now. I really appreciate you watching and taking the time to check out my artwork. I'll never ceases to amaze me. Really appreciate it. If you can, please like, share, comment, whatever you like. Share my channel around, share it on all your socials. That would be fantastic, so I can get some likes and build my subscription base. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you get something out of my videos as well. I really do. The finished product, sort of like this, and it came out pretty well. And I really appreciate you watching and listening. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.